Let's look at some associations in data. Let's start with what is a scatter plot. Here's an example of what one looks like. So scatter plots are ways we can look at bivariate data. Bivariate data is when we have two variables. So in some examples are the price of gas. Our two variables are the amount of gas and the amount of money. Miles per hour, speed. Our two variables are the number of miles you've traveled and how much time. We've got lots of different types of bivariate data we can look at. In this video, we're going to look at a group of students who studied before a test. So our two variables here are the number of hours they studied and the test score they got. Let's use that data to make a scatter plot. Step 1, we need to find our axes. So if we look at our data, here are two labels for our axes, the hours studied and the final test score. I put the hours studied on the x-axis because I feel that it's what controlled the other one. The variable that controls is the one that should go on the x-axis. So my test score, that's what's being controlled, it goes on the y-axis. Now let's use that data to make our scatter plot. We're going to start with student 1, who studied for 3 hours and got a test score of 90. So where 3 hours and 90 points meet, I put a dot. Student 2 studied for 1 hour and got an 86. Student 3 studied for 5 hours and got an 84. Student 4 studied for 4 hours and got a 92. Student 5 studied for 3 hours and got a 91. Student 6 studied for 5 hours and got a 100. Student 7 studied for 0 hours and got a 76. Student 8 studied for 1 hour and got an 82. Student 9 studied for 2 hours and got an 85. Now, we have all that data on the plot, but how do we tell if it's connected? Which effectively answers the question, does studying more improve your grade? The way we can tell this is by drawing a line through the data. So if we look back at our scatter plot, we want to draw a line that goes along the same direction as all the points, so that about half the points are on top and half the points are below. We want our line to match our data as well as possible. Here's the line I drew. It goes through my data with a couple lines on top and a couple lines on the bottom. So now to decide if the hours studied and test score are connected, we need to look at the association of this data. So we want to know, is it positive or negative? If the line, as it moves from left to right, is going up, we call that positive. If the line goes down, we call that negative. Here the line is positive, so I would say there is a positive association between hours studied and test scores. We can also look on, is the association strong or weak? If all the points on the scatter plot are close to the line, we call that strong. If they're spread out and look more like a fuzzy cloud, we would call that weak. Here, most of my points are right up against the line, so I would say that there is a strong positive association between hours studied and test score. Now, what if something weird happened? Sometimes we have what are called outliers. And these are when something weird happens in our data. So for example, what if someone studied for 4 hours but only got a 50 on their test? This dot is really far away from our data. So while we have to look at it and figure out what's going on, we're allowed to leave our line where it is. Maybe after talking to this student, we learned that they had their textbook open for 4 hours, but were really playing on their phone. Now it's your turn to try. Using this data and our line, how many points would you expect to get if you studied for 6 hours? Good luck!